Hello, good morning, and welcome to Motivation Part 2. Now we're going to talk about the need, motive, and value theories of motivation first. Um, but the need, motive, value theories are just one of three types of theories. And so these need, motive, value theories emphasize the needs and values that we have based on the personality and the traits that we have. The cognitive choice theories assume that we're active decision makers who strive to be rational and choose to do things and how much effort we put into it. And then the self-regulation theories, there we go, propose that the way that we monitor our behaviors and adjust our behaviors to pursue goals is what helps us to understand motivation. So within the need value motive value theories, there's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Alderfer's ERG theory, and Herzberg's two-factor theory, which are really intimately tied to each other because Maslow's is the original, king of the motivation theories, whereas Alderfer and Herzberg's theories are sort of plays on Maslow. Now, job characteristics theory is a good bit different from the other three. So we'll start with Maslow, and if you don't know Maslow by now, wow, here I am, okay? Because Maslow is the king of all. So let me step back a moment and talk about that notion that I said, Aristotle's notion of entelechy. There's a force in the universe, and the universe wants things to happen. And so it kind of goes like this. When you were born, the universe wanted you to become something. And so the old analogy is an an acorn. There's an acorn, and the universe wants it to be an oak tree. And so there are forces in the universe that will push that acorn to become an oak tree. When it comes to humans, Maslow used the term self-actualization, which would be the analogy of becoming your potential, becoming what you were intended to be. And so the entire universe is driving you towards this. And this notion of motivation, remember, is a driver, a force. And so all of a sudden, we are being pushed, pulled, we're directed to self-actualize. Ultimately, our goal in life, the thing we want to do, is self-actualize, to live up to our full potential, or from a Christian perspective, to find our calling, right? I mean, perhaps you've heard that in a few sermons in your life. So this notion of a calling or self-actualization or purpose, okay? And so what happens, though, is in order to achieve your purpose, and according to Maslow, most people do not, in fact, satisfy their self-actualization needs, right? They just never get there. Instead, they get stuck at different levels because according to Maslow, we must first satisfy these lowest level needs right here under my head. We must first satisfy these lowest needs, physiological needs, the need to satisfy hunger and thirst. If we do not satisfy hunger and thirst, and then safety, and then belongingness and love, you don't move your way up. And so what will happen is sometimes we'll get stuck at one level and we cannot move up this ladder. And so one of the key factors to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is going to be a little bit different than these other two we're going to talk about, is that you must satisfy them and it must go in this order. And if you have not satisfied one level of needs, you cannot move to the next one. And yet ultimately we're motivated to get to self-actualization, but hardly anybody gets there. And so the implication for this in an organizational sense is that, look, each worker that you have is at a different level of their needs. And so each worker needs to be considered as an individual when thinking about which motivational forces should I use to maximize this employee's output. Now, Alderfer's ERG theory, ERG, existence, relatedness, and growth, we find that Alderfer has basically taken Maslow's five levels, all right, there we go, and crunched them into three, okay? Crunched them into three, and the main difference here between the two is that according to Alderfer, you can be working on three different levels at the same time. And so I'm going to jump forward two slides, but you take the ERG, existence, relatedness, and growth needs, and they map out, oh, here we go, on the left side. Existent needs are basically the physiological ones at the bottom, belongingness and safety. Relatedness needs have to do with love according to Maslow's hierarchy, but need for socialization or something of this nature, social interaction. Whereas growth needs, according to Aldifer, really have to do with the self-actualization and the esteem needs from Maslow's original design. And so what happens is that satisfaction, an internal state that arises from obtaining what one is seeking, a desire similar to the concept of want or intensity. All right, so anyway, the key difference is that any one worker can be focusing on all three of these levels at the same time. And so clearly, if the implication of Maslow was you need to know what level they're on, the implication of Aldifer is that you can adequately provide motivation at any level to any worker. Okay? Herzberg's two-factor theory breaks down the Maslow's hierarchy, but into just two components. Hygienes at the bottom, motivators at the top. Okay? Right. Hygienes at the bottom, motivators at the top. And so hygienes are just job context, okay? Supervisor problems, low pay, mundane activities, in the same sense that food and survival are relatively mundane motivators. Hygienes are relatively mundane. And so what we find is that if hygienes are present, then there is job dissatisfaction. It is only the motivators that will lead to job satisfaction, right? So again, I guess I skipped the very first line. Those things that create job satisfaction are different from those that create job dissatisfaction, okay? So even if you add things to create job satisfaction does not mean that dissatisfaction won't creep in. Okay, so you can provide motivators, challenging work and stuff like this, but if hygienes are present, like uncomfortable work environment, then it doesn't. You've kind of got a weird situation where you've got both job satisfaction and dissatisfaction at the same time. Okay, and so I've always been a believer that money can't buy happiness. It can only stave off unhappiness. Okay? And so the presence of motivators can lead to job satisfaction, but if you don't have job satisfaction, it doesn't lead to dissatisfaction, it leads to neutrality or something like that. The presence of hygienes will create dissatisfaction, but without them, it'll go to neutrality. Okay, so these are clearly separate dimensions from each other, should not be confused with each other. Okay? And so take a look at this summarization where it takes all three of these and kind of jams them together. So there's very little research supporting need theories. And I mean, it's straightforward. I mean, if you talk to Maslow you go back to Maslow's original work and he'll tell you the reason that there is no research in this is, and I'm just giving Maslow, because it's not a scientific theory, okay? Since it's not a scientific theory at its fundamental basis, then no, you can't have scientific research about a non-scientific theory. And so Maslow himself will even say that. It's not a cut on Maslow, but it just is what it is. It's not science. And so, not a surprise, a non-scientific theory is not tested scientifically. So job characteristics theory, I think, is actually a pretty interesting idea. And I think job characteristics theory fundamentally goes back to what I may have mentioned maybe in topic 1 even. And as I said, one of the most important ideas that I have that makes me feel good about IO psychology was Hugo Münsterberg's basic conception at the very beginning, where he said there's no such thing as a bad job. There's bad placement of people into jobs. Okay? If you've not done a good job with fitting the job to the worker, you'll have a problem. Okay? And so here we got this idea is the fit between the individuals and the jobs, or perhaps even changing the jobs to fit the individuals. Okay? So the jobs characteristics theory is motivation is determined by the effects of both individual differences and personal, the fit, okay, job fit. And so we have this fascinating theory visualized here, where there are 5 basic dimensions to a job, core job dimensions in the left column. Skill variety, task identity, task significance, autonomy, and feedback. Okay? So these 5 different dimensions, and all jobs contain some degree of these 5 dimensions. Okay? Now, these 5 dimensions have the ability to create psychological states in the workers, including meaningfulness of the work, experienced responsibility, knowledge of results, etc. Okay? And so then what happens, ignore that bottom oval for now, I'll come back to that in the next slide. So these core job dimensions create these critical psychological states, and these psychological states lead to real performance outcomes, right? In other words, high internal motivation, high quality of work performance, high satisfaction with the work. Clearly, this is an intrinsic motivation theory. I mean, we're working on internal stuff. However, this model, which is a beautiful model, again, ignoring that bottom oval, it's a beautiful model, but that bottom oval can't be ignored, okay? And so as I can show you on this next slide here, this growth needs strength, kind of a weird thing, but it's like a personality variable. Growth needs strength. And it's like, how much need do you have for growth in your life? Are you satisfied with your current state of affairs, or do you have a desire to make your state of affairs better? Something like that. Okay? And so it's an individual difference variable. And again, I'm positive it would be, let me see, the ocean. Orientation, assertiveness. I don't know which one it would be. But anyway, it's clearly related to to the big 5 personality factors in some way or another, but it does what they call moderate. Moderate is, we'll just run the word, but it has an actual statistical meaning, which is beyond the focus of our course. I can still remember having to learn the difference between mediators and moderators. Oh, God, my brain hurts. That was graduate stats, so you're okay. But it moderates the relationship. For all practical purposes, that means if you want to understand this relationship between the job dimensions, the psychological states, and the work outcomes, you must know this individual difference variable of growth needs strength, because it moderates the relationship. Okay? So job characteristics model has some implications to it. Jobs should be designed with the core dimensions in mind, and individual differences can affect the employee job fit. And so maybe the idea is you ought to move workers around your factory until you get a fit between the worker and the job. What kind of research has been going on? Not overwhelming results. It's been designed for intervention, as I say, to move workers around to perhaps find the job that best fits them, but that's not the way it's been used in reality. Okay, so we'll come back on the next topic, and we'll talk about the cognitive theories of motivation.